All right, we're starting.
It's a little better, yeah.
Let me see if I can change my audio settings here.
Okay, no problem. We got some time.
Okay.
We'll pop in now, so
Oh, now the attendees are starting.
yeah, start to pop in. So can folks hear us? Okay. Hey, folks.
Tell me
just
what is it like?
second.
What does the microphone sound like right now?
It sounds better.
Sounds better. Yeah, I think we could probably make this work. So, okay, great. Hey, folks, just wait a second. We're gonna just check one last mic. There's a lot of different microphones we're dealing with right now. So bear with us. Thank you.
I'm sorry, before we get started.
1 second. Clyde, what I'll do is I'll give a quick introduction, or actually just a 5-minute introduction, and then introduce you. And then
Are we about 5 minutes out, or are we ready to go?
we're about, for your presentation, about 5 minutes out. I'll do about a 5-minute introduction,
Okay.
and then up to the Institute and the goal, and then we'll cue you. Thanks, Clyde.
Oops. Why is it there?
Okay. All right, guys. Should we hit it? Go. Let's go. All right. So thanks everyone for your patience. Sorry for the slight delay there. So I'm Abel Coe. I'm the director of the Institute for Augmented Intelligence in Medicine at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. I.AIM's mission is to bridge computational methods with human expertise to advance medical science and improve health. So we started this journey a little over a year ago, and boy, what a ride it's been. It has been a fast ride. And our goal has always been to move fast, not to break things, but to build things. And specifically, I think our team here is over and over again, we've been focused on building community. Internally at Northwestern, that means recognizing and connecting all the amazing people, faculty, students, trainees, their expertise, their data, all the novel methods they're developing that are oftentimes already in flight, and where they can use some help, we're there to lend a hand. This AI Bowl was born out of an effort to build that community more broadly. So we've recognized that, seem like actually I was born and raised here in Chicago and have a certain loyalty for the middle part of the country. And we've seen or recognized, not just sort of anecdotally, but actually in the literature, that despite having some of the best engineering and medical schools actually in the world, that sometimes there's maybe not the attention that's given, especially when it comes to things like artificial intelligence and machine learning applications. And so we've extended to our community building out and in the firm belief that together we're going to go further. So I am super excited for today to see the culmination of hard work from our whole team, and also to see and hear about the hard work of all the student teams who have spent the past few months hard at work to get to this place today. I'm also incredibly grateful for all the people that made this happen. So in addition to our team, there have been a number of individuals who we would be nowhere without them. I think Sheila Kessler in particular deserves a big call out. She has been gone above and beyond, and really just every step of the way she's been with us right at our side. Student and faculty teams, again, I know you put a lot of work into this, and especially our sponsors. Our sponsors, in a really challenging year, to sort of partner with us in this first of what we believe will be future efforts, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. Really couldn't thank you enough, and we'll have a chance, I think, to recognize our sponsors throughout the day today. So I think it goes without saying that the world has changed, but with change, we also see opportunity, and that opportunity is to make things better. Recognizing that there are things that were not as good as they could be, and we simply need to do better. There are places we do not want to go back to, and particularly with regards to health equity, which was the reason for the focus of this first year's competition on applying novel methods to address health equity issues. So with this in mind, I'm absolutely honored and excited to welcome today our keynote speaker, Dr. Clyde Yancey. You can see there, he's got, actually we cut off, actually what you don't know is that he has about, let's see, 7 additional titles that go beyond MD. But he's Vice Dean of Diversity and Inclusion. He's the Magistrat Professor of Medicine. He's a Professor of Medical Social Sciences. He's Chief of Division of Cardiology, Associate Director at Bloom, and Deputy Editor at JAM Cardiology. But more importantly, I can just say about Clyde, Clyde approaches everything he does with like thoroughness, commitment, and heart. As an example, earlier this year or so, there's a group of faculty, we came together earlier this year to propose inclusion of diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of the promotion and tenure process. And Clyde, again, many of the things he does, I think he does out of passion. He was our wise counsel, an advocate, and in no small part helped make this a reality here at Feinberg, where diversity, equity, and inclusion is now a consideration as part of promotion and tenure. And I've heard Clyde speak, and I have to say, I always walk away inspired and better for hearing what he has to say. So please join me in welcoming today Dr. Clyde Yancey, who is, like all of us, virtual. And thank you, Clyde, for, again, your willingness to help us here. Thank you.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted to be a part of this dynamic meeting and love the premise of this meeting. The idea that we are understanding novel ways to address health equity, thinking very carefully about how we can avoid some of the mistakes of the past and find a pathway going forward for the future. It is so important that you have amassed a group representing the best of the best in the Big 10. I'm not from Chicago, I know you are, but I am a part of Chicago. I've been here 11 years, and I love the idea of those of us in the Midwest taking the lead on solving the big issues. I'm going to go through some information for the group. It looks like there are about 40 to 50 of us amassed today. I want to give you a couple of caveats before we get started. Some of the information I will share with you, I have shared with other audiences. You may have even seen it. I will also share with you that some of the information that you will see may be a little bit disconcerting, because I will use some of the more challenging themes in contemporary discussions about health equity and disparities. But I hope that if you bear with me, that the most important caveat will be a coming together of how we can move forward and find a different path, a different way, a different model that leads to a more equitable healthcare delivery system. So I'm delighted to be a part of this Big 10 academic alliance in this artificial intelligence challenge. I have no relevant disclosures for this presentation, and I think it's important for us just to get started. I've titled this Achieving Health Equity, Narrowing Disparities, the Role of Data. Let me share with you your own purpose. This is downloaded from your own meeting materials. The Institute for Augmented Intelligence in Medicine at Northwestern University, this is our institution, is hosting the first annual Big 10 Augmented Intelligence Bowl to address health disparities. Our goal is to bring together talent in medicine and computer science to raise the profile of augmented intelligence, AI, across the institutions representing the Big 10 Academic Alliance. This is a bold statement. There are a couple of caveats here. We, as the leadership of Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine, really adopted a shift in nomenclature. Instead of thinking about artificial intelligence, we really wanted to think about augmented intelligence for an express purpose, not to suggest that there's some different kind of intelligence that we're curating, but in fact, we're using data science to augment our ability to make intelligent decisions in medicine. And I think that nuance actually is quite important. I'm also pleased to see that you're using the strength of the amalgamation of your several institutions to target something as important as health disparities. It therefore is incumbent upon us to deal with the definition first, and I'll do this several times. Thinking about what is a disparity, it might be quite easy for those of you that don't think about this on a day in, day out basis to simply see a difference between groups And because the difference exists, say that constitutes a disparity. I would like to argue the opposite. There is a specific definition for disparity that is portrayed on the data that you see before you. These findings are actually quite old, but they're still quite relevant. This is one of the most significant work outputs of the former Institute of Medicine, now the current National Academy of Medicine, of which I am a member. In this seminal publication from 2002 that really set the tone for the definition of these differences between underrepresented groups and represented groups, it identified that when there is equal access to care, it is an evident truth that the quality of health care is different. So let's start with that as one of the first platform statements. I'll make several platform statements in this presentation, but that's the first one, that when there's equal access, we have accounted for that socioeconomic variable, there is an evident difference in the quality of care received by minorities and non-minorities. But here's the important thing. That difference, aptly named, may be multivariate in origin. It may indeed be because of what's indicated, what's appropriate. It may indeed be because of what a patient prefers. But once we've dealt with the biology, the appropriateness, and the preferences, there's a residual difference that exists. And that residual difference can be compartmentalized into two categories. One category is that difference is attributable to the way systems are configured. Now, remember what I just said, another platform statement, the way systems are configured. And the second compartment is a difference that is unfortunately related to the way we process information about other people, the way we exercise our biases. I'll make the case that those biases are subconscious, but worse than biases, sometimes there's prejudice and sometimes it's something worse than that. That then defines a disparity. And what we're trying to work with you for the purposes of this meeting is to understand how can we use data to at least better understand the disparities and maybe see a way forward. So let me start with a question. Why is a discussion about health equity necessary in an augmented intelligence curriculum? Let me argue that the reason this is necessary is because of the journey we've all transpired. COVID-19 completely removed the veneers on our healthcare and our health and society and exposed the depth of health inequities. There are many things in which I'm deeply immersed. Part of this is serving as a journal editor in the JAMA Network. And in April of 2020, I authored this paper, which is one of the early descriptions about the experience of COVID-19 uniquely in persons self-described as African Americans. This paper continues to be cited by many and used as a platform to generate discussions and action plans about how we can narrow disparities. I am not, however, going to go through all of the data in this paper with you, but I'm going to highlight this one statement. This statement was lifted from the paper and really has become the most relevant comment that we generate, specifically that as a country, we needed a trigger that would prompt us to fully address the extent to which healthcare disparities exist. And COVID-19 may well have been that bellwether event. Let me portray for you relevant data now and show you how data gave us the insight that allowed us to make these statements. There are data that were amassed during the height of the pandemic by the American Public Media Research Lab's website. It is striking that the nomenclature on the landing page is the color of coronavirus, COVID-19 deaths by race and ethnicity. There's a lot packed into this. There's already the supposition that there's a difference as a function of race and ethnicity, and this difference is based on mortality. That's as serious as this conversation can become. If we look at the data, which were constantly aggregated on a serial basis, weekly basis, and every other week, through 2021, I'm showing you the latest outputs on the data set. 1 out of every 400 Indigenous Americans is now dead due to COVID-19. 1 out of every 600 Black Americans is now dead due to COVID-19. These numbers reflect an excess mortality that's portrayed in the lower commentary. In the spring of 2021, this website executed an interesting pivot. and went from capturing this dissimilarity in the burden of death due to COVID-19 to this, the dissimilarity in the way in which different groups subscribe to the coronavirus vaccine. Now, when we think about this, we see an irony that is hard to dismiss. In those same groups that bore this disproportionate burden, now the data inform us that similarly, these groups are not availing the vaccine that will protect them from further mortality. So again, data here have informed us, one, about the burden of disease, and two, about the uptake of an important resource. The original descriptions were about the Alpha variant. You know that we're dealing with the Delta variant now. These are data recently downloaded from the CDC website. If you begin to look at data emerging in late May, early June, you see in the darker orange bars the presence of the Delta variant. And you can see how through late summer, it became the predominant variant. I'm sharing this with you because now we can look at something very important. This is a heat map of the United States. Dr. Coe recognizes this right away because this is the way that we who think about prevention and epidemiology like to depict burdens of cardiovascular risk across the country. When we see dissimilarities, that strikes us as a necessity to explore further the etiology of these dissimilarities. Just looking at the color plot, you can easily ascertain that whatever we're describing in this heat map has some variability. What we're describing here is the percent of the population fully vaccinated. Now, you're not surprised to see that there's variability there because you've seen this in the lay news, but it is calibrated according to a phenomenon known as the Social Vulnerability Index. I'll say more about that later, but suffice it to say that the Social Vulnerability Index is an approximation of another very important phenomenon known as the social determinants of health. This is identified by how people work, how people live, how they recreate, their transportation, their access to reasonable food, and to have reasonable wages for the work completed. If you now look at the color scheme, a very important message emerges. The Social Vulnerability Index goes from 0 to 1. Scores close to 0 would imply the largest amount of resiliency to an external stress, like a pandemic. The colors that are deeper blue would say the highest representation of vaccination. You can very quickly see that the sky blue colors are in the upper Midwest, in Colorado, and the East Coast, particularly some areas of the West Coast, meaning that these are communities that are most resilient, that are least impacted by adverse social determinants of health, and communities similarly where there's been significant uptake in the vaccine. If you just simply look across what we and others call the stroke belt, that is across the southeastern United States where the burden of cardiovascular risk is high, we see two disturbing trends. Now the color scheme tells us that these areas have the most vulnerability vis-a-vis the social determinants of health and are receiving the vaccine at the lowest rates. Only a few areas are actually receiving the vaccine at higher rates because their exposure is so great, meaning they have a very high vulnerability. Here is a point of emphasis for the purposes of your lens, which is thinking about the use of data. The way that we achieve a social vulnerability index is to look at 15 tracks in the United States Census. This is publicly available information, but it requires a large data exercise to create this vulnerability index and then apply it to areas at risk. So what are the lessons learned from the first part of my discussion? Again, we're talking about using data to understand more about health disparities. I will tell you this, unprecedented access to public health data fully exposed COVID-19 as that bellwether event that we argued in April 2020, uncovering the depth of health disparity in the United States. So that's a very important take-home message. Now, let's move forward to the next question. Why is a discussion regarding health equity necessary in an artificial augmented intelligence curriculum? We've discussed COVID-19, but what about the social disruption in 2020? The caveat I gave you in the beginning was that I would address some themes that may be disconcerting because it forces us to revisit that part of our society that has been most troublesome for so many people, me included. But let's start with a simple exercise. This is a classic experiment from the psychology literature. It's called the Herman grid. As you look at this grid, do you see black boxes or do you see gray circles interspersed between the black boxes? It's not a trick question. Both are there. I'll give you a moment to continue to cogitate as you view this graphic. The point here is that because both expressions are available in this graphic, the fact that we don't all see the same thing tells us that inherently we process information differently. Here's another image that's less abstract. This is me standing in the midst of 800 of my peers on the campus of Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine, proximate to the time when George Floyd was murdered. We're recognizing 9 minutes of silence and bended knee to exercise our freedom of speech to process those events. What about now? This is in the same temporal sequence, but about an hour north of Chicago in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where a heinous violence act occurred. This is in that same community, right at the moment where one man lost his life and another man is at risk for spending the rest of his life in jail. And what about here? This is downtown Chicago, close to where I'm standing now, close to where I live and work, where there was absolute anarchy. And what about here in St. Louis, where citizens are expressing their displeasure? And then what about here, January 6, 2021? When you look at these images, difficult to process, all of us have an emotion. The way we process information is important. And it's critical in this conversation because for you, as someone that's attempting to look at data agnostically, you need to be keenly aware of how you're processing information and what potential biases you bring to the table. Some of you may process these images by thinking about things or feeling emotions like sadness or despair, thinking about violence, thinking about anarchy. While others of you may have seen these images and thought about civil protests, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, social justice, issues of equity, issues of democracy. But overall, all of us have the ability to both think fast and think slow. This was brilliantly captured in the work of Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, who was really wondering, how do we make consumer-oriented decisions? All of us have these hyper-fast subconscious neural networks largely predicated on stereotyping life and living experiences that allow us to come to quick judgments about people, about circumstances. It's in part defensive, helps us avoid situations that generate fear. But we also have slower pathways that invite more cognition, that allow us to think, be more deliberate about how we process experiences, images, and how we evaluate people. In your case, how you evaluate data. The entirety of this part of the presentation then is to acquaint you with a very important concept. This is one of the key takeaways. Understand that we all operate with some degree of implicit bias. This is particularly the case in science because we may think that we're looking just at data. I look at clinical data all the time, write about it, analyze it. You're looking at technology that aggregates large buckets of data. But even still, that experience is subject to bias. We all have it. It's an automatic preference. It's ubiquitous in society. It is informed by prior experiences. And here's the takeaway point. Yes, we all have it, and the majority of us have the same bias, a preference for men of European ancestry at about 70%. And these data have been acquired from medical students and repeated within scientific groups. And so this is an evident truth. I've used that before. This is another evident truth. We all have biases, and the majority of us have a bias in favor of white men. Now, why does this matter? I am a clinician, and I'm going to a clinic just after this keynote presentation. I will see patients for the rest of the day. I will interview them, and I will upload their data. What kind of interpretive eye will I apply to their data? if I am comfortable with who they are, how they represent themselves subconsciously, I am aligned and my interventions will more than likely be favorable. But if I am repulsed or concerned or frightened by something they've said, the way they appear, something they've done, what's the likelihood that my decisions will be high quality? And in particular, if I'm impacted by a stereotyping, bias, or even a prejudice, I'm less likely to make good decisions. Don't think that managing data isn't subject to this same sort of workflow. Here's the most difficult thing we'll talk about, but it's important to get this topic on the page. We cannot overlook what is the critical element here, and that's racism. But racism can very quickly be supplanted with any number of isms. We can think about ageism, sexism. We can think about anxieties or antagonistic activity towards those in the LGBTQI category. We can think about geography, immigrants. There are so many targets here. Ultimately, it's the same experience. There is a definition here, and I want everyone to pause, even me. The reason for the pause is that I wanted you to process your gut visceral reaction when you hear the term racism and prepare for something that's more academic. There is a relevant definition. The definition appears in front of you. But even more so than that, there is a multidimensionality to racism that allows us to deconstruct it, remove our emotive responses, and think conceptually about why we're having this conversation. There's the cultural racism, which is how society views individuals and how we're depicted in the media. There's the personal racism, if you will, the experiences that I endured as a child growing up in the Deep South in the 1960s. And then there's the institutional piece. Now, you may remember when I shared with you the definition of a disparity, I told you that when those residual differences fall in two buckets, one that is attributable to bias, prejudices, but the other one that is attributable to the way systems are configured, I was giving you a presage for what I'm sharing with you now. Yes, the trigger phrase in society right now is structural racism, but we can go to the next level and talk about barriers that are in place because of the way systems are configured. That having been said, look at the definition given to this concept by the Aspen Institute, a system in which public policies, institutional practices, cultural representations, and other norms work in various, often reinforcing ways to perpetuate racial group inequity. That definition now has another interpretation, one from C.S. Lewis. Many of us as children read C.S. Lewis's work. Our children are probably reading C.S. Lewis's work, and I had a chance to review some of C.S. Lewis's writing just last evening. But I'm going to stop again because I think there's power in silence. I'm going to give you 8 seconds to just read this statement. Think about the juxtaposition here. There's a definition relevant to the way systems are configured that either impede access or enable access depending upon the group. But we have to remember that those systems are put in place by people. Yet another theme that I'm trying to deliver to you today is that even when you look at the composition of databases that seemingly are agnostic and are not emotive, in fact, people constructed these data sets. People determine which queries would be included in the data set. People determine how the data would be represented. And you have to be aware that there may be some biases in place, even in the construct of information, something that you would presume to be fully agnostic. So you've seen a lessons learned profile earlier. Here's another lesson learned. There is a deep social divide in this country that's driven by race. It is upsetting. It is disconcerting. There are many that would argue against it, but it is another evident truth. The third time I've used that phrase. And this deep divide impedes our aspirations. So let's take another step further and talk about how data can help us in this whole exercise. Specifically, let's for the moment say that though the initial descriptions about the dissimilarity in the burden of COVID-19 were according to race and ethnicity. Many, including my work, suggested that it was about communities. Now, let me tell you why that's the case. What struck me in the first several months of 2020 was that, yes, in Chicago, those persons succumbing to COVID-19 were dramatically more likely to be Black or brown. But what was truly striking was that the entirety of that burden came from just five neighborhoods in Chicago. That quickly brought into the conversation that perhaps it wasn't race, maybe in fact it was place. Now, I mentioned the Social Vulnerability Index before, and I'm showing it now as one of several assessment tools that can help you better understand this intersectionality between self-described race, ethnicity, age, gender, sex, and community. Social Vulnerability Index, Area Deprivation Index, Distressed Communities Index, geocoding, and at a minimum, not using administrative data to ascertain race or ethnicity, but self-reported race and ethnicity. So I'm standing on the campuses of Feinberg today. The cursor is very near, again, where I work and live. What might you think would be the Social Vulnerability Index for Streeterville? I'm sharing with you that it's very close to zero, means that's lowest vulnerability, highest resilience. If we move this cursor just 10 miles south in the classic social science experiment going to the south side of Chicago, that Social Vulnerability Index increases to nearly 1, meaning the most vulnerability and the least amount of resilience. Well, for a demographer, sometimes that would be sufficient, but we're not demographers. Now, if we come back and look at the COVID-19 cases, you can see what captured my rapt attention in early 2020. Those darker colored zip codes we see here are in fact the communities where the aggregate burden of COVID-19 was quite remarkable. Just so happens that that's where Black people live. On the west side of Chicago, you see 2 zip codes. Just so happens that's where Latino people live. If you take the next step further and look at the Social Vulnerability Index, you see there is a mirror image of those communities at risk. Remember, this is reviewing the census data, acquiring information from 15 census tracts, and creating a score. You take the next step and look at the mortalities, and now you see something that's very compelling, that in fact we can better identify an association, not between race and negative outcomes, but between characteristics of communities and adverse outcomes. This is a step forward. Now, what might drive the adverse vulnerability of these communities? Turns out it has a very relevant history that dates to post-World War I. I suspect everyone on this call has heard about the phenomenon of redlining, but do you know what that really is? So coming out of World War I, there was a housing crisis in the country. There was a spirit of rejuvenation trying to deal with the stock market crash in 1829. So the federal government said, let's back mortgages. Let's create this homeowner loan corporation, HOLC, that would assess creditworthiness in different communities around the United States. If a community received a D grade, it was deemed lowest creditworthiness, less likely to have a supported mortgage. Anything C or higher was a more creditworthy institution. What was not placed in the calculus, though, was the Jim Crow era, which deeply embedded segregation in many major cities like New Orleans, like Detroit, and especially like Chicago. So let me show you the actual map. Indeed, they drew red lines around the at-risk communities. These red lines exactly highlight the south side and west side of Chicago, akin to the map I just shared with you. What was improbable, but did occur, is that whereas one would have envisioned that citizens would have emigrated from the lesser credit-worthy communities where they couldn't purchase homes to better credit-worthy communities, because of segregation that was enforced, there was an immigration of African Americans into those greater risk communities. And correspondingly, there was a systematic disinvestment of community services and social services in those same communities. Now, if I go back and look at the map that brings together the zip codes, the social vulnerability index, the COVID clusters, and the fatalities, you see a very reasonable approximation of the original redlining from the 1930s. And it makes the compelling suggestion, not proof positive, that a system established 90 years ago may in part be a root cause of the disproportionate burden of COVID-19 in communities of color in Chicago. And once again, you can see how data expose this peculiar risk. If I were to step outside of my office today and get on a train here in Chicago and head south, the prototypical community in the south side is Inglewood. For every mile I would travel on that train, life expectancy would fall. So much so that by the time I got to Inglewood, there'd be a 30-year gap in life expectancy between Streeterville and Inglewood. Guess what the nomenclature is for that rail service? The red line. An irony that I think is quite cruel. Let me go to some of the other indices. Here's the area deprivation index. This comes from the CDC, the domains of education, income, employment, housing, household characteristics. And you can see that within each domain, there are several variables that go from most advantageous to least advantageous. I particularly like the distressed communities index. There are now 7 metrics. You see them here. And there are multiple tiers within those 7 metrics. Again, utilizing data to get really careful descriptions of communities. And think about the power of bringing all of these together. Let me make that point of emphasis. There have been several publications like this in 2021, where data sets that originally described differential burdens of disease according to race, because we now have ways of representing the social determinants of health, using what I would argue would be big data points to basically redefine this. And what's so compelling is that if you look at those with adverse social determinants of health compared to those without, the hazard ratio is 3.0. Now, all of your data is 7, but that means there's a 300% increase in significant cardiovascular events that overwhelms whatever the contribution of race happens to be. So this is a powerful depiction of how thinking more carefully about the way we aggregate data can allow us more precisely identify the risk and hopefully begin to think about some root causes. Now, here is a high point, and this really comes from a number of conversations with Able Co. over recent years. What if everything we think we know is wrong? That seems to be a very provocative interrogatory. What is our data source? How do we determine these issues, particularly these issues about disparities? How can we be certain that our research applies to everyone? Does our data source incorporate everyone at risk? And should we, in fact, worry about data inequities? This is another point of pause, because I want you to think about this question very carefully. Again, courtesy of Abel and some of his mentees, I was struck by this information. Out of 1,000 persons, 800 of whom are reporting complaints, less than 1% actually ends up being hospitalized, and it's from the hospitalization experience where registries are created, and of that hospitalization experience, the minority are in academic medical centers like Northwestern, like the medical centers affiliated with the other Big 10 schools, yet we use those data sets to inform medical practice. Is that correct? What about here? If you take this even further, and you begin to wonder, how do you take that same group that makes it to the hospital and then further disarticulate the data source? And you see that not everyone is consistently in electronic health record. You see that not everyone consistently receives the same kind of care. The point of the matter is that there's great variability in how data are aggregated and selectivity in the data sets that we actually see. These data are pertinent only through 5 years ago, but it demonstrates how rapidly the data sets are growing in electronic health records. This is of concern, but it is juxtaposed with this. These are the data points that we're accustomed to acquiring from electronic health records, But look at all of the other potential data entries for an individual at risk for disease. There's social media activity. There are search activities. There's so many other things like credit card purchases that inform us about the totality of a person's life and living circumstances with highly variable data quality as you begin to look at this. I am drawn to think carefully about this paper originating out of the UK 6 years ago, technology-driven disparities in technological solutions. To make this evident, if we're thinking about a breakthrough in the diagnosis of prostate cancer, that actually has a disparity that is male versus female, but by the definitions I gave to you, that's more of a difference than a disparity. The same thing can be said about mammography. But what happens when there's a tech-driven diagnostic tool that is not fully represented across populations? Then it becomes a disparity, and it requires us to think about a technological solution. If we're thinking now in a very different way about applying the use of data to understand differences between populations, look at the steps here that have to be considered, and it starts with, oddly, number one, who's paying for the data set? What questions are being raised? How was the data set created? So funding is there. What's the driver? Why does an entity want to curate this information? What's been the design? What data fields are incorporated? How were the data collected? Who interfaced with a human being to capture this information? What about the analytics? Were they biased or not? And then how are the data interpreted? This life cycle is important. And I think this more than just an artistic representation that there's a stair step down. Because I think the stair step down reminds us that at each step in the process, we lose precision, we lose authenticity, and we're at risk for making poor decisions, particularly when we're using data to think about these health inequities. And what about here? When we think about a racial equity data roadmap, look at the several steps depicted. You start with an evident health issue. I've described one for you today. You try to think about what's the impact of something like race. You determine if the data set is appropriate for that. And there are no statutes against which you can make that determination. Then you need to understand what the raw data say about health outcomes as a function of race and ethnicity. You need to use other data sources to corroborate or challenge it. And then once you've done that, you need to make plans to act upon the data and understand how you move forward. This is a very complex, multi-step process if in fact the goal is to achieve health equity using data. You've heard me talk now ad lib and in great detail about the social determinants of health. It is necessary, if any of you are involved in analytic activities, to really unravel root causes of health inequity, to find ways to incorporate the social determinants of health as they're depicted here on the screen. And I've given you several indices that are helpful. So I want to close with what I think is the solution. And the solution, using the lens of your group, is to think about how do you embrace data equity. I'm really drawn by this publication from 2 years ago by a colleague of mine whom I know well, Eric Topol. This was in Nature Medicine, one of the most highly regarded scientific periodicals we have. High performance medicine, the convergence of human and artificial intelligence. I want you to look at Eric's abstract because he makes the argument that the use of deep learning, machine learning, might in fact enhance our ability to make important decisions about patients. But he also highlights in the abstract the limitations about which we should be concerned. And look at the first limitation. It's bias. There are other important limitations like privacy and security, but we're starting this conversation out appropriately. Yes, there are great attributes to using data agnostically to inform a better understanding about health and disease, but there is a bias risk that we cannot overlook. Eric shows something very simplistically about how these neural networks, not intended to suggest they're akin to human nervous system cells, but instead to say that there are layers of review as the raw data are input that, particularly based on the amount of data, will allow us to come up with outputs that seemingly inform decisions based on the data alone. That is quite intriguing, and we all are drawn to this idea. He demonstrates the examples of these kinds of applications across the human lifespan. But if you look at all of these, you could begin to understand if you don't start off with a representative data set, you may miss the mark on thinking about genomic interpretations of children. You may miss the mark thinking about mental health assessments. You may miss the mark thinking about the definitions of cancer and the identification of cancer, not appreciating the differential rates of cancer in different people. If you don't have a representative data input, the data output won't work. I'm particularly drawn to this almost cartoon depiction that Eric put in print that tells an important story. You start with the individual. You look at all the potential data inputs, then go through multiple neural networks, and you get an output that he's depicting as a virtual health coach, virtual health guidance. Is that a good thing? Well, what he does here is to compare the potential for a virtual health coach with a self-driving car. The goal for the self-driving car is what's called class 5, full automation. We know that there have been some epic fails trying to achieve this point. Do we want class 5 for medical coaching? In fact, we don't. Where we want to land is a place where the work you're doing to allow data to inform hypotheses, to enable diagnosis, should be at the point of interface with the human. So we can say, here is an increased awareness of the likelihood of a certain event, but it necessarily requires the judgment. Maybe over time, as we iterate augmented intelligence, we can do something constructively that lessens the contribution of the human insight, but hopefully never fully negates that, because full autonomous driving for a vehicle and full autonomous care for human represent, I think, evident threats. This is his statement about the limitations and challenges, and I pulled this out verbatim because I think it is so important. Look at the first sentence. Inequities are one of the most important problems in healthcare today, particularly in the United States. His point is that not everyone lives in a society, a community. Not everyone has the social determinants of health that allows them to be a have with regard to data generation, data access versus a have not. And this is a concern, another evident truth that needs to be within your dialogue about how you move forward. So what's the lessons learned? Again, you've seen several earlier versions of this during my presentation. Data are powerful. Oh, by the way, remember, data is plural. Datum is singular. So this is grammatically correct. Data are powerful. Just a little nerdy input there. Data inform. Data are subject to bias. If you take away nothing else from the time I've spent with you today, please keep this in mind. Data are subject to bias. And finally, to achieve health equity and eliminate disparities, it is my assertion that there must be data equity. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's program. I want to thank Abel Coe for the incredible work he's done putting this together and leading our Northwestern Augmented Intelligence Center. I want to thank Nan McDonald for all of her support. And I want to thank you for caring enough, being engaged enough to use your unique skill to answer one of the most important questions in health and society today. Thanks very much.
I wish we were in person so I could thank you in person. Whenever I hear you speak, there's always things that stick and persistent, like long after. One of the things that I saw today, the C.S. Lewis quote in particular, is something that makes me feel a little uncomfortable, because when I see white collar, I also think white coat. And is that something that, which side are we going to end up on? And one of the things that's attractive about these technologies is that they are powerful, but I worry that if there aren't the right people or principles involved, that it can be misused, and I think and have wider population impact. So I was wondering, do you get a sense, like, we have, as physicians, we take a Hippocratic oath, like with these new tools that sometimes we can't even understand. Do you have a sense for how do we shape this field going forward? How do we constrain it, or not even constrain it, but just apply principles so that we don't get too far ahead and end up again like worsening the inequities that you laid out so nicely?
So, Abel, you've really brought forward an excellent question. And for the benefit of the audience, let me give you two perspectives that I think are quite important. We know the right way to engage with a new concept like data science. It's just like quality of care. We know the power of having information. We know the power of the Hawthorne effect. If we make a commitment to study and make the results of our study available to all, that transparency almost universally incites change. Meaning this, I've spent a lot of my career in the quality improvement space. If you go to any physician, they will swear that they're doing the right thing for the right patient at the right time without any exception. And it's only when you show them the data for their own practice, their own patient population, that there is a moment of recoil and then recalibration. And so the same thing in this scenario. For those that would argue that we're using the data equitably, I would say look very carefully at the work outputs and see if there are groups that are not included. I've done this with the NIH and have demonstrated how government-funded trials have strikingly misrepresented and failed to incorporate the full breadth of the population. But they thought they were doing such because, after all, it was a government-funded trial, and it was in the directions to incorporate women and minorities. Not happening. So I think there's something about the Hawthorne effect, making the data available, letting people see who's involved, and then letting that be the change. I know our time is limited, but I'll make one other comment. Just like other areas of health and healthcare, we need to be sensitive to who's aggregating the data and who's doing the analytics. We need to understand that the prism that we all bring to the table, think about Herman's grid and how we all see information differently. We need to be careful that there are people sitting around the table that have a prism that sees information differently, so that the way in which we construct the analytics reflects those different inputs. I will leave you with this thought, Abel. If we're having a broader discussion about diversity, let me be very clear. It's not the head count that matters. It's not the matrix. It's not the placemat. It's not the pictures. It's the diversity of thought. And I would argue that that diversity of thought is as important in data science as it is in clinical science.
Amen, Clyde. Again, thank you, Clyde, so much. I know you're clinic. Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate your generosity and the graciousness of your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you again for the invitation. Really appreciate it. Best wishes, everyone. And let me know who wins the $35,000 prize.
We'll find out. Thank you, Cal. Thank you, Clyde. All right. So I just can't, for those who haven't seen Clyde speak before, it's really, it's just, like I said, it always makes it, something he says always sticks with you. And so I hopefully this will be, give us the right footing as we move forward with the presentations today. So we'd like to now transition to the presentations. We are very fortunate today to have 5 fantastic judges. And so we'd like to do some very brief introductions for our judges today. And so Nan and I will go back and forth. We'll introduce folks. Let's see. Nan, do you have the slides?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Stephen. So Stephen Collins, a man who needs no introduction in the startup community here in Chicago. But he has this great title of being an instigator. That is his actual, it's on his bio somewhere, for 1871. And for those who are not from Chicago, 1871 is the year of the Chicago fire. And as happens with after catastrophes, oftentimes we grow back better and stronger. And so he's one of the instigators of the 1871, which is the premier incubator for startups here in Chicago. He's also has served as SVP and senior advisor to the Pritzker Group. And currently, and this is how I've gotten to know him best, is he's CEO of Matter, which is the startup incubator in Chicago that is in the same building as 1871, but really focused on health and healthcare. And actually, I have to confess that when we had a startup here, we actually were in Matter for a few years there as well. And so he's been also a great personal help. During the pandemic, he was very active in convening groups across Chicago to help us sort of address and think about how we might address the COVID pandemic. So welcome, Stephen, and thank you for that.
I also want to add that Stephen is on our external advisory committee. So a lot of the work that we focus on and prioritize, he comes out of the committee that helps us kind of make sure that we put a lens of, is this actionable? Is this scalable? And also for the teams that are that win this competition, they will be receiving a 6-month membership to Matter to kind of help them accelerate and incubate their ideas and projects even further.
Thank you, Stephen. Welcome.
Thank you.
Caitlin Donovan. Hi, Caitlin. So welcome, Caitlin. I'm not sure if we have, I'm sorry, I keep popping up. We have this gigantic screen in front of me. And so it's just, my eye naturally is drawn to the gigantic screen. But Caitlin Donovan, we're really thrilled to have her. Caitlin is somebody who knows a thing or two about operational excellence and connecting people to the healthcare they need. So was recently tapped to be global head of Uber Health. And previously she served in roles that are very related. She was chief operating officer at CareCentrix, which managed care delivery to the home, Circulation, which is a digital transportation company, and Logistic Care, which is now Motive Care, which was focused on the non-emergency medical transportation space. So somebody who, again, brings operational excellence and that sense of how do you best connect and bridge different worlds. So I think that's her perspective will be very valuable as a judge today. So thank you, Kate. And then I'd like to introduce Han Liu. So Han Liu is Associate Professor of Computer Science and Associate Professor of Statistics here at Northwestern University's McCormick School of Engineering in the Department of Computer Science. He literally does magic because his lab is called the MAGICS, or Modern Artificial General Intelligible and Computer Systems Lab. And he operates at the intersection between statistics and statistical learning and computer systems, and artificial intelligence. He brings not only practical sort of applications, but he also is advancing the methods by which we conduct artificial intelligence today. So we are very thankful to have his expertise in assessing the student presentations today. Thank you, Dr. Liu.
And also I'd like to introduce Vijay Murugappan. I'm sure I'm butchering your name, Vijay, which I shouldn't. He's the managing partner and CEO of First Quadrant Advisory. They advise startups and other innovators on how to scale. And he and I go way back. He actually was my boss at one point. And so he also has a branch within his company that focuses on sort of like the social behavioral health and kind of addressing substance use. So Vijay, thank you very much for your time. And we also have Wendy Wright, who, as you'll note, when you become a sought after person, we want to welcome Wendy because she has really deep roots in Chicago. She started life with the city of Chicago as their chief privacy officer. And then she's also been at Abbott as well as Allscripts in the area of privacy and security. And then she went to Stanford and became chief privacy officer there. But we still claim her as a Chicagoan. And now she's at Cigna. So thank you, Wendy, for giving of your time to this. And so I think at this point, I'm going to start with our big teams. So the way the entire presentation is going to go is that we'll bring each team on. There'll be an introduction, and then the teams will come on, and then there'll be a short period of Q&A with the judges.
All right, we're almost there. We just are sorry, guys. The Badgers theme song was not able to be played today. But we did get some trivia up there. So I think you guys, whenever you're ready, go ahead. And I think Meg will be prompting you for that. Here we go. Great.
All right, perfect. You can see our screens?
We can. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, let's start then. So I am Miriam, and I'm with Jonathan and Rufus, and we are representing UW-Madison and Longevity Solutions. So we're going to start out today with a hypothetical. So picture this: you are pregnant, you are at a doctor's office, and you find out you have gestational diabetes. You're told how to prick your fingers and test for glucose. You're told you need to eat differently and move more, even if you've been nauseated and unable to eat or move the way you want to during pregnancy. And you're feeling this guilt. You're feeling stressed because you're told that you have a higher chance of cesarean delivery, preeclampsia, and a large baby. All things that contribute to the 50-50 chance of you developing type 2 diabetes in the next 5 years if you can't control your condition. That pressure smothers some of the joy of pregnancy and begins to consume your life with carb counting insulin doses. So this is a hypothetical, right? But this happens to 135,000 women every year in the US only.
This is expensive for both the pregnant person and for their insurance. And if left untreated, it has massive adverse health effects on the unborn child, including a much higher risk for type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And overall, gestational diabetes disproportionately affects minority populations. In fact, women of racial and ethnic minorities are twice as likely to have gestational diabetes in all developed and developing countries, not just the United States. And 70% of women who experience gestational diabetes develop type 2 diabetes later in life. And this could look really bleak, right? But there's a way of handling blood glucose to significantly decrease the likelihood of these later health complications. And it all has to do with blood sugar levels. As a gestational diabetic, you have to keep your blood sugar in the recommended zone for a certain amount of time every day to decrease the chance of these complications later in life. Newly diagnosed patients are told to watch what they eat and move more, which in theory makes sense, but in reality isn't actually very actionable. These are a couple of the many people we talked to, one of which was particularly poignant to us, which was, I asked my doctor what I should do, and she said, find a hill and walk up it. Moving at the right time can make a huge difference, though. Very recent studies, one displayed here, have shown that postprandial physical activity is effective at mitigating glucose excursions. The orange dashed line represents the exercise group, and the blue solid line is the no exercise group. And as you can see, the no exercise group is experiencing glucose excursions while the exercise group is not. But the reality is no one is helping individuals recognize when that activity needs to happen to be most effective. If you have gestational diabetes, it's hard to know exactly when to move and for how long.
Even for women who are lucky enough to have insurance cover a continuous glucose monitor, there is no reminder, no accountability, and no gamification to the task of keeping blood sugar in a safe zone. This is the problem we're solving with Nudge by Longevity. Our solution is a mobile app. It helps people recognize when their blood sugar is leaving or likely soon to leave a healthy range and bring it down to a safe zone predictably. And it does that with 3 key elements. First, it tracks users' glucose levels, heart rate, and acceleration through our app, a CGM, and a fitness tracker. It helps users set a goal that makes sense for their circumstances of how much of the day they should spend in a healthy blood sugar range. And finally, it studies users' glucose patterns with AI and predicts when a user is likely to have a glucose spike. It then informs the user of that risk and helps them curb that glucose response. We're going to see a quick 30-second demo of what that process looks like. So in this example, this person has not yet experienced a glucose spike, but Nudge recognizes she's about to. And that's when she gets this notification. She opts in to move to curb that spike. And as she moves, her heart rate is in the ideal zone. She is timed for the ideal amount of time that Nudge has learned it takes to attenuate a glucose curve of this sort. When she's done, she can save her progress, view a prediction of what her glucose curve could have been without the help of Nudge and her movement, and see a progress report for that day.
With this product, we aim to help people manage their gestational diabetes and help reduce the rate of adverse pregnancy outcomes due to gestational diabetes by 50%. We also aim to have no more than 2% of patients with gestational diabetes who are insulin dependent. Normally, that's between 10 to 20% of patients who depend on insulin. It is these outcomes that typically lead to future health complications like cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. Miriam just mentioned that our app collects biometric data. So how do we use machine learning to transform that biometric data into personalized nudges? Our current model takes 3 variables: movement as measured by an accelerometer, heart rate, and glucose, and find patterns that can predict future glucose levels. Our app uses random forest, linear regression, and I.AIM algorithms, which so far appear to perform well for our glucose data. Here is an example of how our model works with real patient data. This chart shows how our model was able to predict glucose levels 30 minutes in advance for a type 2 diabetes patient. We found that a prediction window between 30 to 60 minutes is useful and actionable for providing nudges to users, and it maintains acceptable error values. Our model accurately predicted 93% of the time spent out of range, which is the key goal our users are monitoring. While there are many types of bias that we could have, we identified 2 of the most important types of bias here. For the development of our machine learning model, we used a publicly available data set, which did not disclose the participant demographic characteristics like sex, gender, race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status, which means that we are likely to have a sampling bias in this initial data set. We know that we need to be intentional in the way that we recruit our trial participants. We'll be careful to guard against selection bias in our trials by recruiting a wide range of gender, race, and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and health literacy levels. We will design our app so that it is approachable for people of all health literacy. And while we're on the topic of bias, ultimately, our app will be a tool for providers to mitigate their own biases by using personalized data for each patient. Healthcare providers generally have some degree of implicit bias that they don't fully recognize. And if patients and providers are using Nudge, it helps to keep clinical decisions data-based and personalized.
We want to talk about what our path moving forward looks like. So after this competition, we are lined up to have Nudge be one arm of a clinical trial that will test the effectiveness of certain interventions and mitigating adverse health outcomes, both for mother and baby in gestational diabetes. The equipment and participant incentive of this trial is funded. We still need to finish the development of Nudge before it begins. We then expect to launch our product to consumers who already have CGMs to be able to start learning from customers and iterating on our product from a performance perspective. This will help us drive down the cost of getting this product into the hands of the populations who have been historically underserved. Now, Rufus, as a Choctaw native raised in the Chickasaw Nation, has arranged to conduct a second trial with the Harold Ham Diabetes Center, which will enable us to work with the largely Native American population on mitigating the adverse outcomes of gestational diabetes. And recall that Native Americans, more than all vulnerable populations are hit hardest by gestational diabetes. Once we've conducted that trial, we expect to have the data we need to launch to the more innovative, scrappy insurance providers who are historically willing to take a chance on emerging technologies. But in order to qualify for general insurance and Medicaid, we do expect to do a third trial on a much larger scale to thoroughly prove its outcomes. Through these trials, we want to prove that offering patients our product package is a no-brainer for improving health outcomes of women and their children across diverse populations. And as we go, we expect things to change, and we'll be looking out for emerging technologies.
The high initial cost of our product is due to its dependence on continuous glucose monitoring technology as it exists, which is expensive. Reliable sources have indicated that Apple and Samsung are both developing non-invasive continuous glucose monitoring, which would drive down costs considerably of monitoring blood sugar. We are developing our product to be compatible with Apple Health Kit now, so we can integrate that emergent technology whenever it comes out. We also recognize that people with gestational diabetes are not the only population interested in keeping their blood sugar in a safe zone. We're open to expanding to other customer bases. We're starting with exercise, with an exercise intervention to keep it simple. And we are conducting interviews to explore future iterations of our product that could include features that would further differentiate us from the limited options currently offered by both finger pricking and CGM technology. But our next step is simple.
We are currently in the modeling phase of our machine learning product. We've selected and trained our model, and right now we're focusing on error analysis in preparation for deployment. Taking our product into deployment will require consultation with a senior machine learning expert and support with front-end development. After the Big 10 AI Bowl, we hope to be able to afford the costs laid out here to finish developing our initial product so we can take advantage of this timely opportunity to begin our trial with Meriter Hospital. Other than development of our product, the trial, including the use of Dexcom CGMs and the compensation for participants, is already funded. We're hoping to earn the privilege of the Big 10 AI prize funding to push our project forward and help start reducing these health disparities due to gestational diabetes.
This is our team. We're backed by experienced mentors, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions about our roles on the team. And just on a high level, we've been helped along the way by fabulous experts, and we're excited to continue to collaborate with them and with any of you to make this a healthier world to be born into. Thanks for your time. There was tons we weren't able to get into, so we're looking forward to this Q&A.
Judges, feel free to go ahead and ask questions of the teams and go on video.
Great. Well, I'll jump in. Thanks so much. I love this as a concept. It's really interesting. It would create a lot of value for people. I have couple questions. I have a bunch of questions, but I'll just start with a couple. So one is, why are you focusing on gestational diabetes as opposed to some other category of diabetes? And then maybe the follow-up question is, have you, since you're giving people recommendations of things to do to control their glucose levels, do you need to take this through the FDA?
Both are really good questions. I'll tackle the first one first. Why gestational diabetes? I think twofold. And the first one is the most important reason, which is it's historically sort of neglected group of people. People often focus on type 2 diabetes. I think a lot of the companies are focused on type 2 diabetes, like, well, the big ones, Livongo and the big boys, big boys in the industry. Not many people are focused on gestational diabetes, but we also think maybe perhaps equally important is the fact that gestational diabetes is further upstream than those other things. They are focused on reacting as opposed to preventing. And if you tackle gestational diabetes, not only do you help that pregnant person avoid a lot of the adverse outcomes in the near term, you also help long-term outcomes for both mother and offspring. Mm-hmm. And so we feel that from a public health perspective, it makes most sense to go after gestational diabetes first.
Yeah, I'd say also from a personal perspective, I was pregnant 3 years ago and I received a borderline gestational diabetic diagnosis. So because I was borderline, I did not have to be pricking my fingers. I didn't have to go through that process, but it startled us. We're partnered into thinking about and trying to figure out, like, what would we have to do if this were a reality. And we are already extremely interested in preventive health and in these health disparities. And so that was what really got us interested in looking into this problem in the first place. That said, this solution, once it is established, it could be a solution for issues besides just gestational diabetes. Does that answer your initial question?
Yep.
The follow-up question about the FDA, options and things out there available right now, like programs that are comparable to ours, have not required FDA approval. So we are leaning into that historical example to project into the future. And I don't think we will require FDA approval for our product. We're leaning on technology that already has FDA approval. So Dexcom's G6 continuous glucose monitors and software like that is already FDA approved. So I don't think we'll need to go through that process.
Great questions. What else can we answer for you all?
Hi, this is Caitlin, and I'm so sorry my video is off. For some reason, I'm having a Zoom issue here.
Classic.
It had to happen, right?
Exactly. But a great presentation. You know, I've been thinking a lot about sort of the holistic care, especially for oh, here's my video. There we go. About holistic care, especially for mothers, just because of the health equity that you see in the maternal health space. How do you think about operationalizing what your product does to make sure folks are adherent to what the nudges tell them to do? What I worry about a little bit is for the folks that would not be able to solve these problems on their own, they may have other restraints, like they're at a job where they can't leave their chair all day. So how do you think about figuring out those adherence barriers?
Right. That's a fantastic question. I think part of, as a partial answer to that question, I think it's relevant to talk about what current solutions are out there right now, like what they're able to be doing right now. This is an example of a reading from a Dexcom continuous glucose monitor. It depends on reaction, not prediction of what is going on. When we've thought about adherence, we have been thinking about it from the perspective of health literacy more than anything else. And having data like this, I mean, data is always going to be valuable, but you never really tap into the true value of data that you have unless there's an actionable component to that data. And one thing that the Dexcom CGMs, the Libre CGMs are not doing right now is making this extremely actionable. This is another solution that most people with gestational diabetes who we've talked to are using. It is pen and paper for many of them, some of them Excel spreadsheets. Even some people do have apps to help with this blood sugar tracking. But again, this is just a reaction to what has already happened. And in the short period of time, the 3 months, when a person has a diagnosis of gestational diabetes before they give birth, it is hard to learn. The learning curve is long enough that it's hard to act on that. So initially, when we've thought about adherence, our thought we've been focusing on how can we 10x whatever currently exists and make sure that people can be influencing their health outcomes as early on as possible. Now, when it comes to adherence, we are exploring potential futures where this app is where some of the data of this app is available to providers, where they have a portal into this data so they can be proactive in helping patients recognize, like, hey, you did well on this week, you met your goal for the last 2 weeks. We are also exploring a model. Again, when I hesitate to talk too much about this because we are deep in this exploration mode right now, but we are also exploring a model that compensates patients for their adherence and for getting their weekly goals on a week by week basis. So in other words, we're trying to 10x what it currently exists. We don't have a way of guaranteeing adherence for these patients right now, but we're exploring ways of making it easier for patients to adhere. Does that answer your question, Caitlin?
It does. That was a great answer. Thank you both so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just wanted to add one quick comment on something that you said, Caitlin. You mentioned specifically, what about a scenario where a user of the app is at work and they can't act on that nudge right away, in the same way that you can ignore your software update on your phone and say, oh, I'll get to it later. We want to have a similar feature for the app. It was something we've talked about where if you can't act on it right now, you can just say, remind me in an hour, remind me this evening, right? And then we can come back and see where's your glucose now. If you're still out of range, then it's still, time that you can act on that.
Hey,
I think we have time for one more question, probably.
We've been given 2-minute, 1-minute warnings.
this is VJ. I think I'm also not able to start my video, but no, great presentation. Great concept as well. I'm a former health insurance executive, so I kind of zeroed in on that one comment you made about health insurance and kind of using that as a route to market. Is that how you guys see it? What other routes to market did you consider, and what barriers do you see?
Yeah, we are definitely leaning heavily into the insurance model, but there are other avenues we're exploring. So direct to consumer is clearly something that's quite expensive for consumers, but for our initial launches, I think that we'll have to rely on that because it will be expensive and because it won't be approved by insurance. The other model is, Miriam alluded to this, which was a model in which we are taking advantage of the technology as it hopefully will exist and rewarding people by having them use their Apple Watch, which will have continuous glucose monitoring abilities on a week-to-week basis, a la a company called Paceline.
Or Fetch Rewards, if
Yeah.
you're familiar with either of those.
And so we can discuss that a little bit later if but not to get too deeply into this, but we are exploring other business model opportunities, but primarily focusing on insurance because we think that it's a key differentiator from our competition in reality.
Right. Our first focus right now is to get this to that initial trial and to make sure it is effectively doing what we've designed it to do.
All right, great. Thank you.
I really want to thank the Wisconsin team. We are at time, and so I know the judges probably have a lot more questions, but we appreciate all the work you've done in the past 6 months. So nice.
Oh gosh, this has been fantastic. We've loved being a part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well done.
So we'll move to, hopefully this time the sound will work.
If not, I'll have to sing it. Former U of R grad.
You should be able to see me, right?
I don't think anyone wants to hear that.
We're gonna use the actual trivia and let it run through so that it gives folks on our back end side the opportunity to go ahead and line up all of the other participants. So
Yeah, I'm not gonna sing it.
you're not gonna sing it anymore?
I forgot. Actually, I don't remember what the fight song is anymore.
Okay, U of I team. I apologize that you didn't get to hear your fight song, but please take it away.
Hello, can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Hello? Okay, let me start. Hello, everyone. This is the leader of the UIUC team. I'm Chao Qiyang, and today I will represent my team to present our AI solutions for this excellent Big 10 Augmented Intelligence Bowl. Our title is called Machine Learning Powered Mobile Healthcare Unit for Addressing Childhood Vaccination Disparities. So our team is called the Vaccine Heroes. We have 3 student members, including myself and Yaroslav Badnar and Junyi Gao. We also have excellent mentors, Professor Jimin Song from UIUC and Drs. Mary Staple, Scott Barrows, and Adam Cross from OSF Healthcare. So we care about the pediatric health disparity problem, and for children immunization, we have witnessed the low pediatric vaccine rate in the low-income zip code, around 40%. And according to the news report in Massachusetts state during the COVID-19 pandemic, the childhood vaccination rate actually declined by 68%. So these pediatric health disparities are usually caused by the race, the socioeconomic status, and the locations, etc. So our primary approach is based on OSF community care and their excellent mobile care units, the Care Van service. As shown in this figure, so the Care Van has many excellent advantages. First, it's flexible. It takes care on the road, and it's also accessible. It provides care when and where it's needed. The Care Van can also be powered by the AI advanced technology, and it builds the trust between the community and the care provider. So in the running process, we have witnessed 2 challenges. The first one is site selection. So where to send our Care Van. And the second one is supply estimation. Since we have limited capacity in the Care Van and the limited refrigerator, and we can't bring plenty of vaccine with us on the road. And also we wanted to make sure that every participant in that Care Van event, they got the vaccine. So how to accurately estimate the clinical supply is very important. Then we formulate these 2 challenges as 2 machine learning tasks. The first one is the vaccine site selection. So how to select the best site for the vaccination event, and what are the ranking criteria of different locations. The second task is the vaccine supply prediction. Given the location and the time of the vaccination event, how to accurately estimate the vaccine supply. After addressing these 2 tasks, we visualize our site selection result and the prediction, the estimation result on our user-friendly visualization interface. So in this project, we actually use multiple data sources. We use the pediatric EHR data from OSF Healthcare, our collaborator, and we have actually 10 years claims data from IQVIA. This is the historical monthly vaccine information. And hopefully we can get the location-specific vaccination statistics from the local public health department, which is the so-called iCare. And right now we have used some real previous vaccines events data, around 7 times pediatric vaccine events from this year and 16 flu vaccine events from the past 3 years. And on the right-hand side, we list the information of some past events about the location, the number of patients, and the actual vaccine supply in that event. We also use other data sets like the school vaccination statistics and plenty of 94 census features and demographic statistics for each location. This is provided by an open API. So about the first task, the vaccine site selection. The goal of this task is to identify the top care locations for vaccination events. So we decompose this task into 3 different stages. The first stage, we extract diverse ranking criteria to form multiple individual lists over the candidate zip code. And this ranking criteria could be vaccination rate, the population density, and the social vulnerability index. As Dr. Clyde just said, this social vulnerability index has another name, the social determinants of health. And in the second stage, we use the well-known Markov chain type 4 rank aggregation method to combine this individual rank list and to provide the top K candidate location for us to go. And in the final stage, we refine this site selection. We further optimize the candidate from the top ranked list. And by considering logistic constraints and previous events and the diversity of the locations. So our model is pretty interpretable because given the selected location, we can trace back to the very beginning to really analyze the criteria and to understand why this location is selected and why this location is called vulnerable. And the second feature of our model is extensible, giving new accessible data and other important indicators. We can form new criteria to empower our model to make it more comprehensive. This slide shows a demo of our site selection result, and the map is actually around the Illinois Peoria County, and we actually provide the top 10 ranked list on this map. Actually, each colored dot is one location. And on the right-hand side, we provide a partial kind of individual ranked list for each of the location. We can observe that for the top ranked list, for the top ranked location, they actually rank pretty high in each individual criteria. And for the second task, the supply prediction. The goal of this task is to estimate the vaccine supply given the upcoming event information. On the right-hand side, we provide the information of our very first physical event. This happened in Dream Center at Peoria at this time. And on the bottom of these slides, we list the real vaccine supply in that event. And the task here, our task 2 is trying to estimate this vaccine supply before the event happens. However, the challenge is that with limited historical data, it's pretty hard to create the prediction models. So we address this challenge by proposing a spatial temporal calibration model. We estimate 2 different quantities and then integrate them together. The first quantity is unvaccinated population near the selected event based on the historical EHR and the claims data, which is denoted by P. The second quantity is the participating probability, alpha. This is actually a function of the selected location, the time information, the weather condition, the driving distance, and other demographic and census feature. The final quantity is given by the product of these 2 quantities. The benefit of the model is that we leverage rich data to make up for the limited historical event data. So this is the running demo, actually a screenshot of our visualization system. So if we click on the selected location on the map, rich information will pop up on the right-hand side. The first section provides us with the census feature information like the annual income per family, the distance to the care site, and the transportation score, other features. Also, we provided the historical vaccine rate curve for each of the vaccine, also the vaccine supply estimation given by our predictive model. So this slide shows the quantitative experimental results of our predictive model. The table shows the unvaccinated population P, the prediction result. It's pretty accurate. And for the supply prediction, we show the result on both the simulation data and the event data. Our model actually provides a decent result as a reference for the clinical team, for the care event team to prepare for the next event. So in the end, we hope to actually integrate our model with the FHIR supportive interface. This part is still ongoing. So we wanted to transform our multiple data resources into flexible FHIR resource bundle, and such that these resources can be used more conveniently and effectively. In the end, we want to summarize our proposed solution. We propose the AI solution for the care event for offering pediatric vaccines and address 2 important challenges here. And for our future efforts, we wanted to get more data to make our model more accurate and comprehensive. The research goal of this project is to submit a manuscript by early 2022. We have actually many development goals. We wanted to do user study and really improve our visualization and customize our AI pipeline for other locations and regions. And later, we wanted to implement and really deploy our system as a Fire app for us to use. And hopefully, if the COVID vaccine for kids is approved by the CDC, we hope that our solution can help to distribute these vaccines and bring the benefit to each kid. And later we show the detailed information of our joint team between UIUC and OSF Healthcare. And thanks for listening. Come and join us in protecting the health of our children. Thanks. And our team will take questions from now.
Thank you, U of I team. Judges, if you could come on video and ask your questions.
Oh, let me...
Great job on your presentation. This is Caitlin. My question is, who do you think is the buyer of this product?
Oh, this is actually a good question. So I think the buyer and the collaborator should be the same. So right now, our customer and the collaborator are the OSF Caravan team. So we consult with them and they provide us with the data. We provide the solution and train our model on their data and develop interactive system for them so that they can use our system as the backend model to prepare for their future events, to select the target vulnerable location and to estimate the future vaccine supply.
A little bit more about the results that you've achieved working with OSF, and I'd be particularly interested in sort of how OSF thinks about success for your model and your tool, and whether you're helping them achieve their their goals and their metrics.
Right. So we actually have a group meeting with them on a weekly basis, and they provide, because right now the data resources are really limited because they just launched this program, I guess, within 1 year or roughly 1 year, and they provide us with 7 like real Caravan event data, and we right now use this data to train our model and provide the results. And they think about to use our kind of results to kind of calibrate with their experience for the next event. But right now our model doesn't used in the real event, but for the next event, they can consider to use that.
Got it. Okay, so I haven't, I didn't quite pick up on that. So you've built it, you've trained the model, but you haven't deployed it in sort of real world use yet.
Right, because you can see here, the previous vaccine event data is really limited, like 7 pediatric vaccine events. And then we use this as a training and show them our leave one out experimental result. And they are analyzing the result and trying to kind of match with their experience if the result is good or not. And then they consider to use our next prediction for the future events as a reference for their future event.
Got it.
When do you expect that
Thanks.
to happen? So when will you, I guess I thought I had missed it in your presentation too. It's like, yeah, how do you know that your model, is good at predicting it? So when will you know that result?
So this slide actually shows the quantitative experimental results. You can see that the MAP result and the MSE result is it's not so accurate as compared to the standard machine learning model. But since we have limited data resources, some of the results for part of the vaccines are acceptable, like for these vaccines. So we already showed them the result, and they considered to take this reference kind of as some reference solutions for the future events.
Okay.
And actually, they run this program, run these events, I think on a monthly basis. So hopefully next month, maybe the end of this month or next month, they will consider use our result. Thanks.
Yeah, I will make a comment about this quantitative results. So the supply prediction is conducted on real test set of the event data. So you can consider this is as a test. So our model achieves at least up to 4 RMSE, and for most vaccine, our model just the RMSE is close to 1. That which means the prediction error is, you can consider the prediction error is only about 1 supply.
Right, I wanted to re-explain here, right? So what Jing point out is that our IMSE result here, for many of the vaccines, our IMSE result is kind of around 1 or 2. That means we probably at the most conservative way, we will bring 2 more vaccines to the event and to make sure every patient, they can get their vaccine.
Got it. Yeah, I think what would be helpful as you continue this study and the program is to translate that, right? So you've built the model, OSF has implemented it. As a result, you've improved vaccination rates in a specific population across each of these. As a result, and there are studies out there that kind of show what improved vaccination rates do, right? Both in terms of wellness and health, but also in terms of medical cost reduction and avoidance going forward. I think if you build out that full picture, it'll have I think your story will have a pretty strong impact.
Cool, thanks, good point.
Hi, this is great and speaks to my public health heart. Have you thought about, or can you discuss a little bit, scalability and affordability, which all goes to sustainability for this initiative? And so once you take it out of OSF and you perhaps go to community-based health organizations or public health organizations that tend to have these caravans, what are your thoughts on that? How would you scale and again, the affordability of it?
Right, so currently the model is what works on the Illinois state, but as we mentioned in our future goal that we want to customize our AI pipeline for other regions. And this is one of our future goal, but we also wanted to integrate our model with FHIR supportive interface such that this model will be more like in a more standard way, such that other people can also utilize our models. And if we wanted to really deploy our model for other states, and probably their data set and other data formats are diversified, but if they can integrate their model in their data in this file system to really transform the data into a standardized way, then our model can actually take into use, I think. And if we wanted to deploy our model in small scale on county, or then I guess maybe if the data size is very small, then our model probably will provide high variance. But if we deploy our model on big counties or big locations, regions, then if the data is plentiful, and our model can provide pretty accurate results. For the expense and consideration, so here the vaccines are actually free for the participating children, because most of the children, they satisfy the CDC VFC program requirement. VFC stands for Vaccine for Children. And also our caravan team, the clinicians, they got this vaccine from CDC also for free. So that part of the cost is not into consideration. And for other costs, according to the estimation of some statistician, this the expense for running that caravan program is around $300K per year initially, and later it might raise to $375K per year. But all of these expenses probably can be covered by fundings, grants, or another donations, and this expense will be used primarily to hire the drivers, the clinicians, and to purchase the caravan, but the caravan is just one-time purchase. And I guess this expense can be covered if the donation or the grants are kind of continuous.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Great, thank you, U of I team. We really appreciate all the work you guys did. It was a ton of work. Nice job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's see if this works.
It works now.
Okay, U of I team, take it away.
Or Northwestern team, sorry.
Northwestern, sorry.
And for whatever reason, the sound actually worked on this one. There's no implicit bias. I just want to point that out. We just were technically challenged, but we did get it running. So.
All right. Hi, everyone. We're the Northwestern University AI Bowl team, and we're here to present Heart Connect, a patient recommendation system. So I want to start by introducing you to Denise. Denise was recently hospitalized with heart failure, which is a chronic health condition which affects more than 6.5 million adults in the United States. Denise wants to learn more about how to manage her condition in a way that works best for her lifestyle. She feels lonely and isolated and wants to meet more patients who have had similar experiences in managing their condition. In our interviews with patients with heart failure at Northwestern, there were many more patients like Denise who highlighted the need for more relevant information and social support. When we dove into the literature, we found that low health literacy and poor mental health disproportionately affect certain sociodemographic groups and may contribute to low quality of life and poor heart failure outcomes. Black individuals have lower health literacy than their white counterparts, and women have a greater prevalence of anxiety and depression. Several of our interviewed patients utilize online patient support networks, like Patients Like Me and the American Heart Association's Patient Support Network, and reported that they were helpful in getting access to 1, credible, reliable information in management of their chronic diseases, and 2, making connections with other patients. Patient support networks therefore help to address disparities in health literacy and mental health, as well as improve patient quality of life. However, current online patient support networks have been less effective among patients living with more common conditions such as heart failure. Current networks tend to have a limited user mix. Users tend to be white, female, and younger, and as such, popular posts may not necessarily always reflect the backgrounds of potential users, especially those belonging to minority groups.
This lack of representation may discourage potential users from using forums and sharing their experiences. Some of the patients we talked to stated, quote, "I may learn something from the support networks, but it won't be relevant to me." Additionally, in current patient support networks, finding relevant information or content may also be difficult due to limited searching methods. Patients also told us that they wanted the support networks to be easier to use. We know that conventional keyword searching, and sorting algorithms that underpin existing support networks don't really take into account user characteristics or preferences. And as patient support networks become more popular, current networks geared towards majority populations may exacerbate already existing health disparities among minority populations. And our group believes that these problems could be mitigated with the use of AI tools that can help maximize the positive impacts of patient support networks on health literacy and mental health among people with heart failure. And so we have a team with the expertise to tackle this problem because of our diverse backgrounds in machine learning and AI, public health, medicine, social media, and consumer health. We're also incredibly grateful to be supported by our wonderful mentors who have roles at Northwestern and in various industry settings. And now I'll kick it over to Kevin to talk more about our solution.
Thank you, Lindsay, for the intro. So our solution, Heart Connect, is a recommendation system that learns about the needs and backgrounds of patient and caregiver users on patient support networks and recommends informational and emotional support content that are most relevant to them. And this is the first solution of its kind, as far as we know. Our system starts with an initial survey that asks patients about their basic demographics and short answers to who they are and what they're interested in. Next, we leverage natural language processing tools to extract user characteristics from surveys and posts. Then a similarity matrix is constructed between users and posts based on structured and unstructured user features. And finally, we recommend content based on the rankings from the similarity matrix. The model is also designed to update itself based on user feedback, such as whether they liked or commented on the content that we suggested. Next slide, please. And I want to provide an example of our recommendation system in action. Here's Denise again. If you still remember, she was recently hospitalized with heart failure and wants to find resources from patient support networks. From her bio and initial activity on the patient support network, we know that she's African-American, 73 years old, has diabetes, is interested in lifestyle changes, and potentially in mental health as well, since she liked the forum post on mental health issues. The posts on the right are the ones currently listed as the most popular content on a patient support network that focuses on heart failure. And the background shows the characteristics of the content creator. As you can see, almost none of the content are directly related to Denise's interests and conditions. In addition, the creators of these content are not that similar to Denise either. For instance, the top two posts are from a 43-year-old man and a 34-year-old mother. She would have to go through many more links to find the content that are most relevant to her, even if she uses methods such as keyword searches. Whereas the posts recommended by our system are more relevant to Denise. The posts listed on the right are those recommended by our solution compared to the default posts listed on the right. The first post is about useful lifestyle changes that many people in her demographics liked. The second post is about emotional support from someone who has diabetes. And third and fourth post is about self-care and dealing with anxiety from someone who's around her age. And the last post is about benefits of exercising and cardiac rehab for heart failure patients from the official AHA source. And now I'll pass it on to Yu Yang, who led our patient trials.
Thanks, Kevin. So here's a timeline of our testing. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, we conducted a series of interviews with 9 heart failure patients to find out how heart failure care can be improved. This inspired our personal content focus. After developing our personalized content model, we recruited additional heart failure patients, caretakers, and medical students from Northwestern to test our solution. We had participants fill out a survey describing themselves in the context of a heart failure patient or caretaker, or in the example of the medical student, a heart failure patient persona. And these surveys were fed into the recommendation system to rank content they would see, as described in Kevin's slides. The content that we are ranking comes from a popular heart failure forum. After our engine ranks the post to fit the user, Users would read the posts and compare the utility of the content to the default most popular posts on the heart failure forum. We utilized a double-blind two-group crossover study in which test participants would browse the information provided by our recommendation system and the heart failure forum webpage in random order. After reading through the 2 pages, users were asked which website they preferred out of the 2. Finally, participants were asked a short set of follow-up questions related to their experiences on the web pages and asked to give suggestions on how to improve the recommended content. Moving on to the results of our testing, here you see we recruited 9 medical students, 7 patients, and 1 caretaker to test our solution. A breakdown of the demographics of our participants is also shown, as well as the region of Chicago for the non-medical student group that they are based in. 63% of our medical student participants prefer the information in our recommendation system compared to the default webpage, while 75% of patients prefer our recommendation system over the default. While these results are promising, we do not yet have enough sample size to make a determination of statistical significance at a 5% level. One goal of our recommendation system is also to match people to individuals that are particularly similar to them. When asked, 60% of patients were able to find someone who is particularly similar to them on the recommendation webpage. One user, a younger male in his early 40s with CHF, exemplified the utility of this, saying, "A lot of times people believe that chronic heart failure is only applicable to seniors. I had heart failure when I was 40. A lot of people think that's too young." Saying of the content, the one with congestive heart failure at 44 on the recommendation page, the subject line attempts to cover something I struggle with a lot, the fact that I have heart failure, especially at my age, with my friends. When I read the responses, it's good to know that there are caring individuals who can show empathy for someone this young. I just felt that the whole narrative of that post I could relate to given my situation. As we mentioned earlier, online support networks tend to be dominated by certain demographics of patients, leaving other patient groups marginalized. Our findings suggest that our support network is better able to bring relevant information to users than the default webpage, allowing different types of users to engage with online support groups without being drowned out by content that does not apply to them. We believe that this will help to improve disparities in the usability of online support networks for patients with heart failure as well as other diseases. And I'll swing it back to Kevin.
Yeah, thank you for introducing the results. So while we have promising results, we realize this is just the beginning of our work. We're glad to announce that we've established a partnership with the American Heart Association to take this project further. We will get access to more user-level data that will allow us to refine our recommendation system. And eventually, we will validate and implement our solution on their recently revamped online patient support network that is available to everyone in the country. Our solution doesn't only work with heart failure. Once we validate our solution in a real-world setting, we can replicate and scale our solution to the hundreds of patient support networks for other diseases such as diabetes, cancer, and mental health diseases, helping to connect patients to the support most relevant to them. In addition to scaling the current solution, we've also envisioned several next steps in terms of features. In the short term, we want to improve our model to better understand what the users are like and what they're interested in. We plan on adding additional NLP tools to recognize patient contexts like intent and sentiment, as well as other patient-relevant factors such as social determinants of health. Our solution can be readily transformed to match and recommend users in addition to content, so we can better connect users and help form support groups. Further down the road, as we accumulate more data from patient support networks, we intend to examine the relationships between certain user groups and types of content. And these insights can potentially inform public health education campaigns. And last, we envision developing informational emotional chatbots by leveraging the user dialogues and interactions collected from patient support networks. And with all these possibilities, we see great potential in our solution for reducing disparities in health literacy and mental health among the population. Our mission is to help create the most connected and fair online communities for patients, and we're looking for your support. Thank you for your time, and we welcome any questions from the judges.
Thank you, Northwestern team, and I promise that Penn State will also have their fight song played, so I don't want the judges to think we just fixed our technical issues, but please feel free to ask questions.
Hi, well, thanks. A couple of questions just to make sure I understand it. So you're not creating your own patient network. You're going to piggyback on the existing networks, if I understand it right. All right, you're nodding. So you just, and is the idea that this becomes agnostic to the patient networks? And if I'm Denise, in your example, is your system become like the front door and then can serve up content from different networks? Or can you just walk through a little bit more of the kind of user, how somebody would interact with your solution and what the user experience would be?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we envision it now would be a model that would sit in the backend of patient support networks. And we would basically gather all the user posts and the official content that patient support networks would have. And we would run it through our recommendation system, providing individual recommendations for patients or caregivers or any user on the care support network. Ida, do you mind showing the slide where we have like a mock-up of the implementation? So yeah, we can share a demo. It's in the appendix. Yeah, so this is what the current website of the AHA support network looks like. And as you can see right now, it's sorted by top questions, or it's sorted, and you can also choose like, it's sorted by recency. What we plan to do is add another option so that patients can choose their individual feed that's selected by a recommendation system. So this is basically how we envision it to work right now. Does that make more sense? Or?
Yeah, so you would essentially work with the AHA or work with patients like me or work with other communities to integrate your analytics approach into their platform. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Got it.
And your model right now is tuned for AHA members and their disease conditions. So I think you showed one slide where you could go to other communities and disease conditions as well. So you'd have to rebuild and train that model to be accurate in its recommendation for each of those conditions. Is that correct?
Yeah, the modeling process will be pretty similar across different types of diseases. We would just have to regather their data and then run it through our system again without too much additional engineering work.
Right, great.
How do you think about, so it sounds like you guys would sit on the back end of existing communities. How do you think about enrollment in these programs or sort of availability of these online programs? Just because my understanding is, especially in the Medicaid space or where there's a lot of health equity issues, a lot of users use their phone as their primary internet connectivity. And so how have you thought about that?
You want to take this one?
Yeah, I guess regarding the phone, I believe many of these forums have mobile apps which users can use to get in. As for I think the larger question is, what is the audience of these online forums? And we know that they're majority white on the younger side and female. And from our conversations with patients earlier on in this project, we found that many patients thought that the content in the forums did not really apply to them because a lot of that content was coming from that particular audience. And we think that with our approach, we can better match information to types of patients that are not normally represented in these current online support groups. And that would help to increase relevance of content to them, as well as increase retention to these websites.
Our hope as well is also to continue to our partnership with the American Heart Association, not just on the technical side, but on the enrollment side as well, so that we can promote kind of the new features, the broader kind of base of this recommendation system and support network, so that we can partner with them to continue to outreach to all of the diverse communities nationally that they're reaching out to already.
Great, thank you.
How did you guys pick the American Heart Association as your initial partner, or is it just happened organically? I guess
several members of this team are interested in cardiovascular disease, and from the semifinals, we settled on heart failure as a topic of interest. The mentors that we gathered, 2 of them are heart failure focused cardiologists that helped make the connection to the AHA.
Great.
If I can ask another question, can you clarify, just build a little bit more on how, you've mentioned a few times that the patients, if you're Black or presumably brown, the patients who predominantly populate these sites don't look like you. It's not entirely clear for me how what you're doing would change the demographic makeup of these sites, or is that not really what you're doing is you would be able to more efficiently extract posts from people who are Black, if it's a Black, people who look like me. Can you just clarify how that works a little bit?
Yeah, so you're right in the fact that we can't change the content base that we're working with, but we believe that in the future, if there is some content on those sites for specific types of users, and as we are able to better show new prospective users that content that matches to what they're looking for, that would help them be more engaged on the site, and I guess iteratively increase the proportion of that type of information. So yes, right now, we're kind of limited on who is currently using these sites.
If there are no other questions for the Northwestern team, I want to thank you guys. Tons of hard work, and we really appreciate your participation in the bowl.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Take it away.
Hi, we are Team Penn State. Our team looks to address a key disparity, health literacy, which affects 9 out of 10 adults in the US. In particular, it disproportionately affects various groups, including 20% of adults who read at a 5th grade reading level or below, Black, Hispanic, and Asian Americans, seniors and young adults, and Medicare and Medicaid populations. Health literacy also affects our economy. 65% of preventable hospital readmissions are associated with poor health literacy, and 50% of readmissions can be reduced with improvements to discharge instructions readability. Health literacy may also cost our economy $230 billion, and 83% of hospitals were penalized from hospital readmissions. Our solution is Simplify, an AI and natural language processing-based tool to be integrated into the electronic medical record to improve the readability of discharge instructions. We plan to reduce health disparities by improving patients' understanding of their discharge instructions following a hospital stay to reduce preventable hospital readmissions. Our goal is to empower patients to take control of their health outcomes as they navigate the health system by better understanding their condition, their medication instructions, and the timeline following up with a provider. Thus, we envision a tool that will simplify communication, simplify understanding, and simplify healthcare. And so we began our endeavor.
After the semifinals, the biggest obstacle we encountered in building this tool was the lack of high-quality data. We found that this simple English Wikipedia corpus, which is standard for text simplification research, is surprisingly low quality and few good alternatives exist. For this reason, we set out to build a proprietary high-quality data set for medical text simplification to power our own technology. This required IRB approval, which, as you know, always takes longer than expected. But in August, we were able to begin data collection, a QI process, and basic algorithm training on available databases. In October, we began algorithm testing, researching our interface, and solidifying infrastructure for data collection. The pyramid you see on the screen demonstrates how we collected the data that was ultimately used to build our AI algorithm. We believe that our solution is unique, in part because of the value of creating our own finely tuned data set. Step 1 of data collection represents the 50,000 discharge instructions we were given access to following IRB approval. These discharge instructions pertain to the 5 most common diagnoses which lead to hospital readmissions as identified by Medicare and Medicaid. For our first iteration, we decided to focus on heart failure, as it is the top readmission diagnosis. Of these discharge instructions, we translated 350 by manual simplification. This step was accomplished by 5 medical students over the span of a month. And finally, the third step was peer review and quality improvement. Each translation was reviewed by at least 2 experienced translators before using a word processor to eliminate any spelling or grammar errors. This ensured the original content was preserved and the text was fully simplified. Next, we'll take a closer look at the translation process.
The translation process was tightly regulated to ensure data quality. Our data set needed to include paired text, an original and a simplified version, and the simplified version had to match the content of the original very closely to make sure we did not change its meaning. Translators were trained to focus on parallel line-by-line structure to preserve text content, substitute out difficult words or phrases, and reduce complex sentences. Readability scores were then calculated by grade level. Here's an example of what the translation process looked like. The text on the left, cardiac prudent, low sodium, is pulled from actual discharge instructions. On the right are the translator's simplifications. You can see how substitutions like heart-friendly for cardiac prudent and salt for sodium are more likely understandable for patients, instead of using medical jargon which obscures the text meaning. Translators also broke up sentences where possible.
The technology underlying Simplify is a sequence-to-sequence transformer model trained to imitate our human simplifiers. We do leverage several data augmentation techniques, including substitution strategies based on medical information found in the SNOMED CT ontology to introduce additional knowledge into our training data. Still, the 300-some simplified instructions is a low sample size for these modern techniques. We do gain some additional power using pre-training from the simple English Wikipedia corpus, but as we mentioned earlier, the data is relatively low quality and it's from a very different domain. Nevertheless, the model does learn meaningful phrase level simplifications from our humans. So all of the examples you see here on screen are taken from instructions the model has never seen during training. While it often doesn't completely agree with what the human simplifier suggests, the simplifications introduced often do appear as legitimate improvements to the reading level, like when it suggests ordered by your doctor in place of prescribed. There are still weaknesses of the model. In many instances, the AI simply repeats the original discharge instruction without modifying them, even when the human simplifier can find improvements. Maybe not so bad, but in worst cases, the model introduces extraneous words or nonsensical content. The third example is somewhat amusing, but it's a serious case of the model failing to reproduce the sense of the original instruction and even failing to be grammatical. So here on this slide, we see some metrics of how the model performs in aggregate. So on the left, you see the readability score of Flesch-Kincaid. This is not a metric that takes semantic content into account. So even though the AI simplification number is the lowest, that does not mean that the AI is better at simplifying instructions than humans. What it does mean is that the AI is less wordy and it's not outputting needlessly long sentences. On the right, we see a plot of how the model has improved over time as we've collected and simplified more instructions to feed to it. So cross entropy is a measure of how well the model predicts the human simplification on a word-by-word basis. Given the rate of improvement, we're pretty confident that as we build out our proprietary data set, our model will continue to improve towards deployment quality.
We've just told you about the amazing work that's been done with the development of a continually expanding, crucial, novel database, as well as an innovative NLP algorithm. Here we want to showcase our mock-up of the front end and user interface. The UI UX is critical and it has to be familiar and provide ease of use. Without these components, wide adoption is difficult, especially with the known phenomenon of click fatigue among providers. Using the HL7 FHIR standard, Simplify will be both EMR agnostic and allow for broad interoperability. Specifically, in terms of data flow, we've been working hard with our internal Cerner team and have streamlined the process of exporting the original data from the EMR, applying the algorithm, and reinserting the modified version as seen here. Maintaining provider autonomy was a key consideration in our design. Here you see every modification by the AI algorithm has been highlighted, and the provider has the option to accept changes line by line or for the entire document, a feature that we mirrored from another popular word processing program. Ultimately, when the provider signs a document, they're confirming that they agree with the changes that are made by the algorithm, thereby maintaining autonomy, which is important to us. As the legal implications surrounding AI technology and the associated black box element within healthcare are yet unclear, this provides a clear indication of a final review by the provider before it reaches the patient.
We wanted to show you a planned development timeline over the next 6 months. Our first order of business will be to increase database size by expanding our team, increasing the rate of translations, and moving beyond heart failure. We will simultaneously work to set up a trial with Cerner and Penn State Health. We're also looking into developing plugins and apps for other systems like Epic and also. From December to February, we will be releasing the text simplification outputs with users to assess their utility while continuing to expand our database. In an aggressive push, we plan to create a minimally viable product by March of 2022 and part industry for integration. 60% of preventable readmissions are due to poor health literacy and comprehension issues. These include readmissions for failure, COPD, myocardial infarction, and renal failure. These preventable readmissions cost CMS about $17 billion yearly, not to mention the unmeasured cost to private insurers. In addition, $420 million in penalties are lost by hospitals to the hospital readmission reduction program. Our simplified text database is the first of its kind in healthcare. In any machine learning and artificial intelligence task, data is king. With this in mind, we have endeavored to create a robust, multi-specialty, simplified library that is reviewed by licensed physicians for accuracy and simplification. This in itself is a marketable product. Simplify can be used to evaluate all patient-facing materials, includes patient portal communication, information on medical apps, and popular websites like WebMD. In the future, we hope to be able to adjust text to regionality and reading level by patient preference. Ultimately, Simplify is about people. We are in the business of improving understanding and simplifying communication. The lessons we learn can be applied outside of healthcare and to other sectors. Our goal is to improve inclusivity and patient outcomes. Agile utility is important for any technology, and some examples simplified can be used are situations with non-native language speakers, those with cognitive disabilities, just to increase audience size. Thank you. Thank you for your time. And please join us on this journey to reduce health disparities by breaking barriers in communication, the very basis of human interaction. A special thank you to our advisors at Vizient, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, and Expert AI.
So judges, if you can unmute and go on video, you can ask your questions. And Penn State, if you want to stop sharing, you can see all the views.
Hi, this is Vijay Murugapan. Yeah, great presentation, team. And this is a very, as you identified, it's a very important issue and a challenge. And this has been something that everyone's been trying to figure out for a long time. Is how do you improve literacy so you can drive down readmissions? What is the scope of your target audience? And the reason I ask that, to me, it feels fairly broad. And can you have an impact if you have a broad approach, or should you start with a very specific demographic, such as a non-native speaker, and really tune your model for that population so you can measure impact and results?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. We know that there are certain populations who have diagnoses that are more likely to cause them to have readmissions. And so working with insurers, working with hospitals, especially ERs and inpatient teams to target those populations would be a good start for us. But more than just special populations, we know that if we approach this by diagnosis, it'll probably give us a good head start, and then we can break it down a little more by community, by regionality, by non-native speakers, and even what language speak primarily.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also, by specifically, focusing on one group, but then eventually being able to broaden out the impact. Just looking at it from just a technical aspect, being able to train, having more training examples, and being able to have different types of language, because a lot of these, I'm in radiology, so even within radiology, you look at imaging differences between Mass General, Stanford. There are specific differences within the outcomes that limit generalizability because of the training examples. So I think being able to apply it to a broad number of people, increase the generalizability, and then overall just wider adoption and better performance overall.
Great.
I loved your presentation. I thought it was really smart to have the provider accept your changes so that you weren't taking on clinical risk of the words that you used. Have you guys thought about, when you move this to other languages, how you'll be able to replicate that if the advice is, or if the discharge notes are in a language that the provider doesn't speak?
I think we've kind of, the way that the model that we've used is very similar to the model that Google Translate does. I mean, I think what they've done recently is they moved on to the BERT model, being able to have that bi-directional, being able to have semantic, relationships based on, not just the beginning or the words that come before, but after. And they've seen a ton of, performance increases because of that. I don't think we've, thought about that problem specifically, but certainly our model, because it works in this way, and as time goes forward, we'll have, obviously, increased training models based on the inputs that the the different providers give to us. You can imagine once we roll this out, we'll not have just the data set that we have that we created, but also the data set that we have from the inputs of the physicians that are accepting the changes or whatnot. And through that, I think there's going to be kind of a building process and kind of a feedback process, and we can be use that to try to not only expand the performance here in English, but maybe collaborate. And that there could be a future collaboration as well with Google. I mean, that's not to say that they wouldn't be open to that. Perhaps they find it interesting, and I think that they have a big healthcare initiative as well. So perhaps the Google Translate partnership is in the future.
One question about the legality of cross translating as well. So in translating between languages, how could a provider be sure?
Yes.
Okay, so initially, at least, I'm not targeting that because that's a pretty complex thing to work with. But a fair amount of physicians will actually speak languages, and I think they would be targets for us to be on our team to work out. Ultimately, though, for someone to have to change in a different language and to sign off on that and put it in the initial discharge instructions is a pretty big step. And I think they would either have to be a translator who's involved in the development, or who they could confirm with that they agree that these are equivalent instructions. But that presents a challenge.
Thank you so much.
What percentage of the simplifications that you have done to date have not required sort of subsequent manual intervention, and in the future, based on what you said about you're going to be dramatically expanding the number of the amount of data going into the system and going through the system, like how far do you think you can get? Like, do you think you can get to a point where 95% of the instructions don't require any changes to them from the provider, or 99%, or is it like 60%, or where are you today and how far do you think you can get?
Sorry, I would just like a little clarification on the question. Is it a question of how often the model is outputting something that is good enough, or how often it's making errors? Or is it a question about the collection of the data set where we are manually simplifying things and how often those need to be simplified? There's a question about model errors.
Yep. How often is the AI system spitting something out that doesn't need to be changed versus, where like the example you gave of where it was talking about P.
So I'd say it's probably on the order of about 25% of the time it's still spitting out something that is not acceptable. I'd say maybe close to a third of the time it's repeating the instruction without changing anything, which is okay. And then whatever the difference between those two is, the rest of the time it sees some kind of at least modest improvement, like changing a word that makes sense. Yeah.
And how far do you think you can take that with more data?
Well, it's always a little difficult to make a projection like that because it's not a perfectly linear relationship as you get more data. But in the chart where we showed, when we went from, say, 100 discharge instructions in our data set to less than 400, we just about doubled how well the model was able to match the human simplifiers and word by word and output what they had suggested. So I don't expect it to necessarily continue exactly in a linear relationship, like every time we get a couple hundred more discharge instructions, we double performance. But I think that, if we had on the order of, say, 5,000 instructions, 10,000 instructions, we'd see really good performance.
And we already have access to 50,000 instructions, and it's still in a limited data set within Penn State Health. So we plan to grow our database pretty dramatically over the next couple of months.
And me being the ultimate maximalist, we just did a study that's going to be published in radiology. We actually did translations of German radiological report translations to English, which obviously here is not a one-to-one type of deal, but with a data set, presumably like Google's or something that becomes of that size, and our model being somewhat similar in that we're using a bidirectional model. Our analysis on that study was that we were able to get up to 95% performance. So being a maximalist, I want to say it can be close to 95% or higher than that. So I think the potential is there.
Great.
So thank you, U of I team, Penn State. I'm sorry, I'm completely off base here. Penn State, you guys did a great job. So I'll turn it to Abel to take us to the break.
Yeah, so I just want to say how impressed I am. I mean, for all the teams, obviously you put in a ton of effort. It shows really amazing work in progress, really great ideas, and you've expanded on them. And I think there's likely some credit goes to your mentor teams as well to have helped quite a lot. And then also for the judges for just a really robust set of questions and back and forth. So hopefully that was helpful. We're going to take a little bit of a break as we sort of compile the scores. And I think the plan is to come back around 1 o'clock, and then we'll take a little time to talk about our sponsors, and then we'll go into the final scores. So we'll see you back about 1 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, great. I think we're back. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a break. So we just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our sponsors. And so we'll play a short video now.
After experiencing the unimaginable, it's time to reimagine healthcare. The Vizient team stands ready to help you stabilize, adapt, and evolve for all that comes next. The Vizient family of companies.
Every day, your organization processes an ever-growing amount of information. With strategic data often hidden in its content, you need an efficient, accurate way to extract it. Otherwise, it can get overwhelming. That's where Expert.ai comes in. Looking at this document as an example, Expert.ai combines its proprietary human-like comprehension with the most effective machine learning techniques and extracts all the relevant data. Its simple, intuitive platform turns your employees into AI experts who can easily design and deploy natural language understanding solutions, transforming all this data into game-changing impact. Expert.ai is already creating business value for many Fortune 1000 companies. Now is the time to discover what Expert.ai can do for you. Expert.ai makes AI simple, makes AI available, makes everyone an expert.
HCSC is a great company. We're a mission-driven company. We're there for our members, and all of the work we do is to make sure we're delivering the highest value to our members.
It's a really fun and vibrant place to work.
And everyone was warm and welcoming, talked about how great they felt the culture was here at HCSC, about work-life balance, for instance, which is pretty important to me, so that I can do some of the other activities I like to do in my free time.
They're really concerned about the member experience, and so they want to make sure that they keep their members healthy, but that they're also providing the benefits so that they can achieve that.
So in order for us to understand what's driving our underlying costs, data analysts will dig into our data and understand what those drivers are, and will be able to help us to change our benefit designs and structures of our network and many other facets of healthcare so that we can make sure we deliver the highest quality for the lowest cost. And understanding our data and the multiple data sources that we have and understanding what's driving our financial results is extremely important, and data analysts are key for that.
We are definitely at the forefront when it comes to using data to advance healthcare.
Specialty and rare diseases have undefined patient populations who are undiagnosed or misdiagnosed, healthcare providers who are unaware of disease states and their manifestations, as well as treatment journeys that are not well understood. Until now, no one had the necessary people, processes, technology, and data to help life sciences companies identify, engage, and activate patients who could benefit from precision therapies. Enter I.AIM.ai. I.AIM.ai transforms real-world data into real-world insights that uncover the ideal patient and their healthcare ecosystem so that life sciences companies can accelerate the successful commercialization of life-saving therapies for specialty and rare diseases. Unlike our competitors, who have little demonstrated specialty or rare disease expertise, limited capabilities across the product lifecycle, and create black box insights that are not well understood, I.AIM has developed a system of insight that utilizes machine learning, artificial intelligence, and evolutionary computation in conjunction with an enriched, tokenized, and granular level data pool of over 300 million de-identified patients, 65 billion anonymized social determinants of health signals, and the ability to easily ingest and transform additional first-party data streams of any scale to revolutionize patient discovery, treatment journey mapping, and healthcare provider intelligence, thus empowering life sciences companies to create optimal patient outcomes quicker with less risk.
Again, a big thanks to our sponsors for making this happen, especially during what has been a challenging year. I also just wanted to, let's see if I can remove my background just for a second. Let's see. Okay, so I did want to take you behind the scenes a little bit because this is how this all happened. First of all, you all know Nan was sort of co-pilot the whole way. I heard people trying to run away, but they're not going to get me attacked. So we're firewall. This is a firewall here. Firewall. So, but so the people channeling back here. So Bill, Bea, I want to say hi. So we had it double checked. So one person checked it and one person felt it. And then Meg, who's been all things to all people with us. Andrea as well, who's been helping us. And so all this really happened because we had an amazing team that really stepped up, and we realized we're really more data people than we are like showman people, I guess you might say. So, but I think all things considered, it seemed to come along pretty nicely. So we did want to share with you a little bit of update about what comes next before we go into just the final results. So, Nan, do you want to just walk us through that?
So I did want to share that we are actually second year. We've had a lot of interest in folks outside the Big 10 Bowl, outside the Big 10 Academic Alliance. So our next one, we're going to open it up and rebrand it to the Third Coast Healthcare AI Bowl. It's going to be covering similar types of we're still going to focus on health disparities, and some of the details are still to be worked out. But we want to make sure that we let this crew know that we're going to do this again, even though it was it was lots of fun, but it was a lot of work. And I think it was completely worth it to be able to highlight some of these amazing teams. If you are interested, this is our timeline for, we're kicking it off right now, and we will start fundraising. So if you're interested in sponsorship, please go ahead and I guess I should share my video. I keep forgetting to do that. So if you're interested in sponsorship, please go ahead and email me. Everybody probably knows the I.AIM email by now. We've been spamming you for the last 6 months. And then we will start talking to schools Q1. And so that we wanted to let you guys know that slight change. It's going to be called the Third Coast Healthcare Augmented Intelligence Bowl.
And a little bit more expansive. And as part of that, we plan to reach out to some quite a few schools and also pull together a steering committee. There was actually enough interest where I think expanding this sort of group that's helping to steer this along will be a nice way to get more people involved and helping to shape it. And so again, I think we've been very excited about what we've seen so far, and so other schools. And so with that in mind, look to a little bit of a longer time runway for us, but also the next event should be, I think, larger with more schools and with additional help sort of pulling it all together. So we look forward to that. And with that in mind, Nan, you want to walk us through the results, which were, by the way, incredibly tight. It's actually hard to even assign these numbers, but there was a difference. So the third place winner, as you can see, was a tie. It was the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and the Northwestern team. So congratulations to both those teams. We'll be following up with each of the teams separately to finalize the awards. This was really, really tight. So I'll just say that first and second place were separated by a single point. But the second place winner was with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Congratulations to that team. And the first place winner is Penn State. And I have to just say, as an editorial, I did pick it from early on. No, but it really, I think
Abel
really
had no vote in this.
Yeah, but it was really, I think, impressive work across all the teams. But Penn State, a great job, just great presentation, well done with a Q&A, and congratulations. And like I said, we'll be following with each of the teams separately to finalize the awards.
Yeah.
And again, we like to just take the time to thank everybody. Our team here would like to thank our sponsors, all the students who put a ton of time in. And if you have social media, you want to tweet about it, we'll be right with you there. We're going to be sending out some updates about this, as well as the upcoming plan for the upcoming.
Yeah, and I would just like to point out that the winner is in no way affiliated with ABLE, because when we started this thing, I believe that ABLE was affiliated with multiple teams that were in the competition.
But this was really an amazing effort by everybody. So again, thank you all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you again in the future. And hopefully you'll be at our next one, maybe even in person come 2020.
Yes, we're hoping.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Great. Thanks, everyone. See you. Bye-bye.